Hello, everybody. A few days ago, I was approached by a research team in Spain called La Quinta Columna, means fifth column in English. And you may remember they became well known when they identified that there was graphene in the fake COVID vaccines. And this is highly significant for many, many reasons, not least the one I'm going to talk about here briefly before we see a recording I made with the team this week. Now, the reason they wanted to contact me is because they said they confirmed from their research that what I've been saying about COVID and the jab since the spring of 2020 has been confirmed by their research, but also intriguingly, especially for me, is they said that they were also confirming what I was saying about the human society manipulation by a non-human force that's in the hidden. We can't see it. We can't hardly see anything if you take into account what's called visible light and the visual frequency band that we can see. But it's so tiny, it's laughable. So almost everything that exists is outside of human sight. So before I get into that and we see the recording, some background of what I've been saying since April 2020. And that is that, first of all, there never has been a COVID virus. It doesn't exist. It's a complete hoax on that scale. And most of the alternative media still thinks that there is, but there never has been. What I said was that the fake virus, the illusion of it, and I explain at length how the illusion was played, was an excuse simply for the mass vaccination of the human population. And what I've been saying about the jab and its content ever since is that the self-replicating nanotechnology, which has been identified under microscopes by scientists and researchers around the world now, that self-replicating nanotechnology is designed to connect us and connect the brain to artificial intelligence and the cloud, this massive global electromagnetic field that's being generated through 5G, 6G, 7G to come. And we see the towers everywhere in urban areas, and that's one way of generating the cloud, yes, but you can't do it globally through towers. If you want to cover every inch of the planet with this electromagnetic field, this cloud, and you want to connect every human to it so we become a hive mind and individuality disappears, then you have to do it from space. And so we've got SpaceX, Elon Musk, and others, but SpaceX is the leader, putting up constantly, he's bragging about it all the time on his Twitter X, low orbit satellites to beam this cloud ultimately at every inch of the planet. And what I've been saying is that this connection between the nanotechnology in the jab that is self-replicating in the body is the connection to the cloud. And what the La Quinta Columna research team are saying is that graphene is a superconductor that amplifies the power of the cloud, the electromagnetic field, inside the body and therefore amplifies the connection between the body and the brain and the cloud. And they say, you'll see in the recording I'm going to show shortly, that they're saying that if you look at the effect of graphene in the body, in the brain, then it explains all the blood clots. It explains the heart failure and the heart disease that we've seen. Not least, they explain why it so affects young sports people, why it's generating really aggressive cancers, and why so many have reported around the world that friends and associates who've had the fake vaccine go through a personality change. Because what the research team is saying is this graphene gets into the brain and then rewires the way it processes information, not least in the connection to the cloud. So you would expect personality changes on that basis. So when you look at disease X, it's bloody everywhere, isn't it? Coming out of the World Economic Forum and Gates and Schwab, and it's all over the internet. Oh, disease X. And, you know, those, even in the alternative media, who've bought the idea that there is a virus, are looking at that, again, a pathogen or a bioweapon to manifest eventually as what's being called disease X. It's always X. But actually what the La Quinta Columna team are saying is, because of this graphene connection to the cloud, it means that all they've got to do is tweak the communications from the cloud to the body, and they can manifest symptoms and health effects that they can then dub whatever they call disease X when they get round to it. And looking at this other area that the team wanted me to talk with them about, and that is the non-human manipulation of humanity. What they found, they say, is that the effect on the body brain of the content of the jabs is the same as that which is found in people who have claimed to be abducted by extraterrestrials. I know, reptilians, greys, whatever. And so they're looking at what I've been warning about all these years, in this case going back decades, that the plan is to create a human hive mind where, instead of thinking individually, we get our thoughts and our emotional responses direct from the cloud to which everyone is attached. And so I was intrigued when we recorded a chat this week to see that they were explaining the methodology of how that hive mind is now possible. Now, the founder and director of La Quinta Columna is Ricardo Delgado Martin. And you'll be hearing from him shortly as he makes his presentation of the findings. But here's some background from his CV. Ricardo has a degree in biostatistics from the University of Seville. He has a master in biostatistics, postgraduate in health biology, clinical microbiology, epidemiology, and clinical immunology. He says he's an expert, a university expert in clinical genetics, has a certificate of scientific contribution from the University of Seville, and is a postgraduate master in child psychology, master in banking and finance too, he says, from the Higher Institute of Banking Techniques and Practices. And on top of all that and all the other experience he's had in these fields, he's got an open mind. Oh dear. What a bonus. A mind that is not enslaved by preconceived idea, but lets the information be its guide. So here's Ricardo. He'll be speaking first and then I'll respond. And make of it what you will, but it's fascinating. Here we go.
Dar las gracias a todos los que están aquí hoy. Voy a llevar un poco el guión de la reunión y en cualquier momento de la misma pueden intervenir, ¿eh? En primer lugar, agradecer, como digo, a todos por hacer posible esta reunión y especialmente al señor Icke por concedernos parte de su tiempo. Vaya por delante nuestro pésame, nuestro más sentido pésame por el fallecimiento de su hija. Permítanme, señor Icke y Astrid, hacer un resumen muy básico de nuestra investigación, junto también al doctor Sevillano y otros científicos independientes que conforman la quinta columna. A modo general, empezamos nuestra investigación con evidencias totalmente empíricas y finalmente hemos llegado a conclusiones que van muy en la línea de lo que usted, señor Icke, viene diciendo desde hace mucho tiempo. Nuestras evidencias más importantes son que la enfermedad COVID es un síndrome de irradiación aguda potenciada por un material que es el grafeno, primero en las vacunas antigripales, con destino para la residencia de ancianos. Evidenciamos el óxido de grafeno en los inyectables por técnica micro-Raman. Entonces voy a hacer una presentación, Astrid, compartiendo pantalla. Esta es justamente la diapositiva de que efectivamente tenemos pruebas de que la enfermedad COVID es un síndrome de irradiación aguda. Inicialmente las vacunas de la gripe. Este es el doctor Pablo Campra Madrid, profesor titular de universidad, doctor en ciencias químicas y licenciado en ciencias biológicas. Las conclusiones de su trabajo es que se han detectado objetos cuyas señales Raman por similitud con el patrón inequívocamente corresponden con óxido de grafeno reducido. Aquí tenemos las señales propias del óxido de grafeno. Bueno, esta diapositiva la dejamos para después. Importante, en función de las propiedades del grafeno y también su toxicidad, se explica tanto lo que llaman COVID-19 como el exceso de mortalidad actual. Lo hemos puesto en inglés. Podemos ver que el óxido de grafeno es detectado en el cuerpo por células especializadas del sistema inmune. Y su comportamiento es similar al de un patógeno. Esto está en español, pero se puede ver que genera una respuesta inflamatoria. Hay daño mitocondrial, daño en el ADN y una respuesta de citoquinas. Desde el punto de vista de la administración intravenosa, se elimina principalmente por la vía pulmonar, causando inflamación pulmonar, y es el origen de las neumonías. Cuando el grafeno toca la sangre, genera un efecto de corona biomolecular. Es decir, el grafeno a nanoescala es lo que ellos han llamado SARS-CoV-2 o coronavirus. El grafeno es un material radiomodulable. Quiere decir que se excita a través de campos electromagnéticos. Y la toxicidad que de él se desprende está en función de la cantidad de radiación que pueda absorber. Vamos a verlo en una diapositiva. La tenemos aquí. Bueno, uno de los efectos también es la trombogenicidad, porque justamente lo que hace es coagular la sangre. Y de ahí todos los daños de ictus, isquemias, infartos que estamos viendo. Ahora, para generar brotes artificiales y que ellos llaman olas, solo tienen que excitar o elevar la calidad de frecuencias emitidas a través de antenas de telefonía. Aquí vemos que el grafeno actúa como un amplificador, convirtiendo los gigahercios en terahercios. Es decir, 1000 veces más dentro de la biología. Concretamente ahora tenemos un peligro especial, y es que el grafeno presente en los inyectables tiene su efecto transistor a la frecuencia de 26 GHz. Y como usted sabrá, tanto en nuestro país, en Europa y en otras partes del mundo, 26 GHz son la siguiente frecuencia a emitir. Ya está licitada en todos los países. Esto dará lugar a la siguiente pandemia que ya están calentando de alguna forma. Pero en las vacunas no solo hay grafeno. Hay una serie de micro y nanoestructuras que conforman una nanotecnología intracorporal. Con distintos fines. Todo ello es visible a la microscopía óptica. Por ejemplo, tenemos, si usted quiere, hemos hecho más de 700 observaciones. Incluso tenemos un vial de Pfizer y tenemos el microscopio conectado para que vean justamente lo que hay. Voy a mover un poco. Esta es la formación de tecnología autoensamblada tras una semana de exposición a la radiación. Claramente son patrones artificiales. Importante también es que las vacunas COVID no contienen ARN mensajero, ni tampoco contienen ni siquiera material biológico. Los propios gobiernos han introducido una falsa disidencia para hablar de ARNM y spike justamente para encubrir esta nanotecnología intracorporal. Estamos haciendo un resumen muy básico y que podríamos ampliar muchísimo. Ahora viene un punto muy importante. ¿Por qué grafeno o su derivado, el óxido de grafeno? Pues el grafeno es una interfaz. Perdón, aquí no es. Es una interfaz neuronal. Es magnético dentro de la biología. Por lo tanto, podemos leer y escribir información. Significa monitorear, modular y estimular de forma remota e inalámbrica a través de antenas de telefonía. Pero también podemos monitorear o estimular el latido cardíaco. Quiero decir que pueden matar a distancia de forma individual o grupal. El óxido de grafeno tiene afinidad por sistemas eléctricos, por el sistema nervioso central, neuronas, y también por el sistema cardíaco, que es justamente donde estamos viendo la mayor parte de los daños. Esto comprende desde el punto de vista de las neurotecnologías, la capacidad de insertar pensamientos, insertar sentimientos y supervisión neuronal de toda la población mundial. En definitiva, es un implante neuronal a través de una interfaz líquida, que son vacunas, incluso vía intranasal, para translocarlo directamente a las neuronas, que es este de aquí. Justamente es lo que le están poniendo últimamente a los niños. Ahora viene otro punto muy importante, porque hasta aquí todo es científico. Cuando nos llegó a nosotros, a la quinta columna, el estudio del doctor Roger Lear, era un cirujano que extraía implantes de personas que testimoniaban haber sido abducidas. Hemos comprobado que la tecnología presente en esos implantes es exactamente la misma que el contenido de los inyectables. Vamos a ver el vídeo del doctor Roger Lear. Un momento.
President Obama, at the time he was trying to raise money for the medical care bill. with the material science associated with these objects that we have found here. With this is a very advanced nanotechnology. These are nanotechnological devices in which nanocarbon tubes, either single or double wall, I won't go into the whole explanation, but they can be elongated and weaved into carbon nanofibers, carbon nanostrands, and they end in crystalline structures, which are what we call orthorhombic, which are regular rectangular structures. So here's a very, very advanced when I say nanotechnological, I'm talking about things that are on a level of the size of an atom, using the principal elements of certain materials, putting them together in such a way so that you're actually broadcasting or switching what we perceive as a radio wave, which may not be a radio wave. It could be scalar technology.
La tecnología escalar es justamente la nueva implementación tecnológica, 5G. Están haciendo exactamente lo mismo. Sí. Vale. Les decía que justamente la tecnología escalar es el 5G. La conclusión inmediata, señor Icke, es que estamos ante una implantación masiva planetaria de toda la especie humana. Esos nanotubos de carbono de los cuales hablaba el señor Roger Lear están presentes en la vacuna Pfizer, por ejemplo. Ahora lo estamos viendo con poco aumento. El nanotubo de carbono es el grafeno geométricamente en forma de tubo. Con un poco más de aumento, lo vamos a ver un poco ahora. Tenemos cientos de vídeos. Y las estructuras cristalinas ortorrómbicas a las que hacía referencia el doctor Roger Lear, las podemos ver aquí. Según la literatura científica, corresponden a antenas plasmónicas de grafeno, nanotransceptores basados en grafeno, circuitos rectificadores, toda una tecnología intracorporal, no solo para monitorear al ser humano, sino para modularlo desde el punto de vista cardíaco y además neuronal. Bueno, cuando nosotros además hemos hecho una revisión de la arqueología, comprobamos, incluso con una reunión que tuvimos con el doctor Pablo Enrique García, que ha recogido miles de muestras en la zona de Ojuelos, México. Comprobamos que lo que están haciendo justamente en este momento ya lo han hecho en el pasado, probablemente con otras humanidades. Y aquí tenemos que hablar de los cráneos trepanados. Según nuestra opinión, los cráneos trepanados consisten en la introducción de implantes sólidos dentro de la biología de esos seres. El objetivo último de la neuromodulación es el sufrimiento de la granja humana. Esto es una energía aprovechable por ellos. Y sospechamos que son entidades puramente energéticas. Ellos dirigen y controlan nuestro mundo y nuestra civilización, seguramente desde siempre, y se ocultan a través del engaño y la mentira en todas las áreas y disciplinas incluida la ciencia, como un depredador lo hace para cazar a su presa. La comunicación entre ellos y el mundo que nos dejan ver probablemente se haga a través de logias y organizaciones secretas. Estamos seguramente, pues, ante su cuarta revolución industrial. No es una revolución industrial del ser humano. Ello les va a permitir obtener bioenergías de forma masiva e industrial. Sospechamos, como decimos, que su naturaleza es puramente energética y según nuestra investigación necesitan dos tipos de energía. Geoenergías, que son energías densas, magnéticas desde el punto de vista terrestre, y bioenergías, que son las que emite el ser humano, especialmente cuando está bajo el sufrimiento. Lo cual los va a conllevar a un cambio en la explotación de la granja por medio de la terraformación del planeta. Seguramente instituciones como la NASA o determinadas bases militares son creadas a instancias por ellos para encubrir su presencia. Se hacen llamar dioses, pero siempre han pedido sacrificios humanos y animales. Bioenergía. Sus unidades de hábitat pretenden ser las ciudades inteligentes de 15 minutos, donde la geoenergía será reemplazada por tecnología artificial de microondas, que dará mayor densidad al planeta, y la bioenergía estará garantizada por la población estabulada. De ahí el quédate en casa, confinamiento climático, confinamiento por una emergencia social o ciudad inteligente. Rendimiento óptimo industrial de la bioneuromasa. Es muy probable que estén preparando el planeta para ocuparlo y tener así el rebaño estabulado a su servicio energético. Hemos hecho un resumen muy básico, pero seguramente desde el punto de vista científico, que fue el origen de nuestra investigación, hemos llegado a conclusiones también científicas y que pueden y que de alguna forma se corroboran bastante el trabajo que usted lleva desarrollando y de lo que nos viene hablando desde hace mucho tiempo. Doy paso a los otros contribuyentes. Si quiere Astrid o José Luis añadir algo.
Puedo comentar prima, después, sí. Okay, okay. So, yeah, I would like just to add, you know, and confirm what Ricardo and José Luis have said for a long time, and it's getting deeper and deeper, and it really correlates with what I have been observing. And I'm, I don't know, maybe you don't know me, but I'm an expert in public health, and I've worked with WHO and the United Nations extensively as an expert for the governments, making reviews of science. And I worked in the pandemic unit for emergency management, putting up the training. And we had to stop after 4 years because Bill Gates came and stopped the funding for us to work. So I've been teaching the IHR, International Health Regulation, and WHO, you know, emergency management in the university after that. But what I want to say is that it corroborates with the fact that as soon as Ricardo Delgado, Quinta Columna, and Professor Compra put out that news, there was a doubt that what was going on was all a lie, and already before it was a total lie, because you never lock down a country in 3 weeks with a virus that mutates so much. It is a very common flu. it has no effect. So it was very clear that it was a coup d'etat in the whole world. So that's where I start. And what I noticed is the correlation with the discovery of nanotech in the vaccine, with WHO producing in the emergency management the gene editing. And I think it's a very important issue because those people are obsessed with gene editing. And I always, challenge Dr. Malone and all those people talking of mRNA, COVID, spike protein. I said, could you tell us why WHO wants to do the gene editing and why CRISPR-Cas9 got the Nobel Prize when it's ethically going to break humanity? So I'm coming from another conjunction to discuss also with what you think all is that on top of what you said, behind the scene, there is a will to keep on hybridizing, to keep on changing humanity the way they want and go into their genome and start changing the book of life, the code of life, the God code, if you want. So, and with CRISPR-Cas, they have reached a breach because you can go in the book of the gene, take off the pages, rewrite the script, and you can become an artificial or a hybrid. So that's really the first point. There is an obsession for them to get the genome data of the whole world to an extent where you think they are not human and they know how different we are, and they're going to target electromagnetically with electromagnetic auditory effect in the brains of people. Depending on their genome, they could target and scan with the drone. I've seen them in front of my house. They were scanning everybody who got the shot. Just to add one thing, has an ID code. I don't know if you're aware that, David. They all have a kind of RFID, and have they're like living antennas. You'll have to confirm, Ricardo and Jose Luis, more about that. So all the people in the street who got those vax, probably all already, the military got probably implants since a long time, are living antennas. And they are no more controlled by the spirit of the human genome, but by a hacking that is much deeper that they want to get. And we can keep on, but I want to just add that to that. That there is a lot of research from Jacques Benveniste and some French researcher of the fact that you can code any disease you want. Every molecule has a weight, every weight has a frequency, and you can create with a frequency a wave. You can create a disease, and I made a report for the judges of France on that you can actually induce any disease if probably the structure, like Roger Lear is saying, corresponds to the receptor is good enough. They can really even make a riot in the street and do zombies. So for me, that is very important, is to talk about where we're going with those people trying to change our codes, trying to become, so we can discuss further, but I wanted to add that it's, for me, a very important agenda.
Yeah, if I could speak.
Luis, si te parece.
Ricardo, I tell you, listening to you so far from a scientific point of view is extraordinary to me, because what you're confirming is what I've been trying to get across for, well, parts of it, much of it, for decades. And if I just quickly explain what that is for people and connect that to what you said, it is an extraordinary correlation and confirmation. First of all, in the spring of 2020, I said two things. A, there wasn't a virus, that was a hoax. And two, that 5G can mimic the symptoms of what they're claiming is the virus. And immediately I was banned from everything that moved. And I've been writing for decades about the plan to create a human hive mind, which can be centrally controlled in terms of its perception. And my explanation of the connection between, and you have to connect the two, between the what I call the fake vaccine and the extraordinary levels now of technologically generated radiation, 4G, 5G, 6G, 7G to come, is this hive mind being played out, whereby the content of the vials creates a self-replicating system. You talk about graphene, it fits perfectly, that infiltrates the body and infiltrates the brain and creates a connection between the human body and the brain and the what people like Ray Kurzweil at Google call the cloud. In other words, this global radiation field. And the more that they expand the 5Gs and the 6Gs and the 7Gs, the more powerful this becomes. And when you talk about graphene being a superconductor that amplifies the electromagnetic frequencies within the body, then you've got this connection between human perception, emotional and mental, and this cloud. And, you know, one of the things I've been getting a lot of abuse for on the internet is pointing out that the alternative media's obsession with Elon Musk is bordering on insanity. Because through SpaceX and others, but he's leading it, and if you look at SpaceX, it's a Pentagon operation, a NASA Pentagon operation. Low orbit satellites are going up all the time, thanks to Mr. Musk's SpaceX, which are beaming this radiation field increasingly as more and more are activated, to ultimately what they want is every inch of the planet. And if at the same time you've got the receiver system, which is the human body infiltrated by graphene, etc., then you have this very hive mind in place through which, as you pointed out, Ricardo, thoughts, perceptions can be manipulated. It's exactly what I've been saying with the plan. And then you take it to another level. And a thing that I've got so much ridicule for, I don't care because it's true, is that humanity is being manipulated from another dimension of reality. And when people don't realize what reality is and the incredibly narrow band of frequency that we can actually see, if they could understand that, then they would realize that these other dimensions of reality, which people say, well, if they exist, why can't we see them? Well, we can't see them for the same reason that a radio station on this wavelength doesn't interfere with a frequency on that wavelength. In other words, these different dimensions of reality are sharing the same space that I'm sitting in now, but they're on different wavelengths, and we are only able to access an incredibly narrow band of visual reality, what they call visible light, and everything else exists in what to us is unseen. And what I've been saying is that there are entities, ultimately energetic entities, although they do take form in various ways, but those energetic entities have been manipulating human society, and they have created on their behalf what I call the global cult. This is the network of secret societies, expressions of which in the public arena are the World Economic Forum and the Bilderberg Group and the Council on Foreign Relations and all these other deeper secret societies. And that network of secret societies, which is fiercely compartmentalized so that even most of the people within it don't realize what the game really is. That's only for the inner core. But that network is representing these non-human entities to impose their will upon the human population. So what you have, therefore, is these non-human entities being able to infiltrate humanity via the fake vaccine and the fake COVID hoax justifying the fake vaccine and all these other sources of graphene, on behalf of these non-human entities, to create a receiver system which can be controlled en masse, hive mind, by these non-human entities. And the other thing, just to finish, which you bring in as well, Ricardo, is that I'm saying that the reason, or a fundamental reason, why this manipulation goes on and why the world is as it is, with so much war, conflict on every level, suffering, deprivation, is to generate low vibrational, emotional, and mental energy in response to that: fear, anxiety, depression, resentment, hatred, whatever. Because that frequency band is what these entities absorb as an energetic sustenance. And the more that they can generate this energy from human response to events and situations, the more powerful they are able to become. And that energy is then recycled back against humanity in more and more control. And I could say a heck of a lot more, but I think that's just explaining how what I've been saying all these years is so magnificently supported by your scientific research.
Sí, estamos totalmente de acuerdo con todo lo que ha comentado el señor Icke, y además nosotros pensamos que esta vez efectivamente han ido un paso más, están como recolectando la cosecha de forma general. Si bien las guerras son barbechos, ahora tenemos una recolección total desde el punto de vista energético. En definitiva, y esto lo podrá extender un poco más José Luis, el grafeno es una vía que permeabiliza la biología para la parasitación de este tipo de entidades, para la parasitación de entidades humanas por parte de este tipo de entidades energéticas. Al igual que la biología, José Luis, si lo quieres extender un poco más y hablar de exoparásitos y endoparásitos.
Lo que más me intriga de todo esto, señor Icke, es después de 3 años de investigación que nosotros llevamos a cabo, tanto Ricardo como yo y el equipo de la quinta columna, llegamos a conclusiones a las cuales usted ha llegado después de décadas de anunciarnos la presencia de estas entidades, de su estructura de gobierno mundial. Yo me pregunto, ¿y qué es lo que piensa usted, puesto que su información procede por otras vías que no son las nuestras? Seguramente que se adelanta incluso a lo que nosotros ya vamos anunciando, que esto supone o anuncia la extinción de nuestra especie como tal. Esta cuarta revolución industrial transhumanista es el final de nuestra especie. Su conocimiento de lo que ha sucedido en nuestra historia hasta hoy, ¿qué es lo que usted piensa que nos espera a los seres humanos en los próximos años? Porque estamos en el apogeo de esta colonización, no sabemos por qué clase de especie. ¿Qué es lo que usted sabe de lo que va a ocurrir en el mundo en los próximos 2-3 años y que nosotros no podemos conocer, puesto que nuestra investigación es científica y las fuentes proceden de nuestro día a día, de lo que vamos viendo, de lo que vamos investigando? ¿Usted sabía esto antes que nosotros ni siquiera lo investigásemos? ¿Puede usted decirnos qué nos está esperando a la vuelta de la esquina?
Well, the idea is complete and utter human control. What we've seen is a process, a sequence. Up to this point, humanity's perceptions, this is the key, control perception, you control behavior, you control human society. You control perception up to this point by manipulating information. You can go back to the period, well, it still is if we only realized it, but when it was overtly, massively the source of control, and that's religion. What religion did was build a wall or circle the wagons around a particular belief system. And anyone that went outside of that belief system, had another view of reality or whatever, was burned at the stake or at best ostracized. And this was holding humanity, and like I say, still is for vast numbers of people, in a perceptual prison cell from which they had very little scope to escape from, in the sense that when you see people like Giordano Bruno and so many others that were challenging this religious tyranny, you see what happened to them. And we had a situation where a very, very few people were controlling human society through the system of kings and queens and monarchs. But what has happened, for whatever reason, is that humanity has moved into a wider perceptual reality, in the sense that so many people now have started to question the religious stories and the religious tales we're supposed to believe in, literally, not symbolically. And science has come in. Now, you will know this, Ricardo, better than most people, I'm sure, is that what we call mainstream science is just another religion. It's another belief system. And it takes people like you who can think out of the box to break through the resistance, again, of a belief system. So they don't really care if you have a religious belief system that's rigid and unyielding, or a scientific belief system that's rigid and unyielding. As long as it's rigid and unyielding, they gotcha. And as we have seen more and more people start to question authority and the authority narratives, which is another expression of a wider perceptual state of the possible emerging, the response to this, and my goodness, did we see it during COVID, has been mass censorship. And what is censorship? It's seeking to control the information that people receive, so that the perceptions that they glean and come to from that information is manipulated. So if you're only hearing one version of something, then you're likely to believe it because everyone else seems to believe it, and that's all you hear. That's what censorship's about. But where we are moving to now is a situation where none of that is any longer necessary, where your perceptions do not have to be manipulated. They will come direct via what we call AI. Now, artificial intelligence. Well, what is it? You know, I hear people talking about AI this, AI that, but I rarely hear people say, what is it? Now, on one level, it's algorithms. On another level, it's artificial intelligence that can be expanded in its awareness by a constant input of knowledge. All the stuff that people are posting on the internet is ultimately going into AI so that AI knows more about humanity than humanity does. But there's another level of AI, what we call AI, which is actually these entities. So what we're looking at is moving through the AI sequence to the point where these entities will be controlling the human mind via the hive system we've discussed. This is where they plan to go, so that humans will not have a thought or an emotional response that isn't generated through the hive mind, and therefore you're going to have collective responses and collective mental states. And, you know, if we go to Ray Kurzweil, this so-called futurist at Google, a Google executive, he said some time ago that by 2030, he gave that year, humans will be connected to, or will be being connected to, artificial intelligence, and via the cloud. And when you look at what I've been saying all these decades and what you're saying from your own scientific research, Ricardo, he is describing exactly what we're talking about. And what he said was that once the connection to the human brain has been installed, these are his words, artificial intelligence will do more and more and more of human thinking until human thinking as we know it is negligible. And what I'm saying is that human thinking, in quotes, will be these entities thinking for us. There will be no human mind anymore. There will only be the entity's mind dictating every response. And of course, as you rightly point out, once you've got that kind of control, you can generate mental, emotional, biological states that produce the very energy that you're looking for. So that's where the plan is ultimately designed to go. And what you have, and you mentioned one of them, are excuses to justify the sequence that I'm talking about. So what was the COVID fake virus? It was simply a manufactured excuse to justify the fake COVID vaccine with all that was in those vials, is in those vials that you've exposed. What is human-caused climate change and the need for the transformation of human society as a response? It's an excuse to introduce this digital control system. And you mentioned the smart cities and the 15-minute cities and all that. Exactly right. That is being justified by human-caused climate change, which is as big a hoax as COVID ever was. And you then see that as a result, and we bring people like Elon Musk back in, he comes up everywhere. I'd like the alternative media just to note that in its naivety. With things like electric cars. Electric vehicles are not designed to replace petrol and diesel vehicles because first of all, people can't afford them. And secondly, there's not enough resources anyway for all the batteries and etc. that would be necessary. The whole introduction of the electric car, the autonomous car, where it drives you, is to get rid of car use among the mass of the people altogether. And thus you are again isolating people in these small areas of 15-minute cities, etc. And so when you look at where this is going and the excuses being used to go there, they are simply made up lies to justify this sequence I'm talking about to the entity hive mind, replacing what you might call the individual human mind, which has its own ability for unique thought, emotion, and perception. So that's where it's going.
But I have a question.
Coincidimos entonces en que la inteligencia artificial sería el cuadro de mando de ese tipo de entidades energéticas.
So I didn't quite get that.
Sí, decía que...
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. That we're looking at, for those that survive, and a lot won't be able to make that transition to a much more kind of synthetic human being. But those that survive will no longer have individual thought, unique spins on the world. The idea is that everyone has the same spin on the world because it's coming from a central point. And, you know, in the end, and this is why it's so important to understand these things, because, you know, when I look at what's called the alternative media, increasingly it is being corralled into the myopia of whether Trump should win the next election or someone else, the myopia of politics and left-right politics and the financial, what I call the 5 cents level of society. And that's where they want us. They don't want us to realize that, and this is why the suppression of this has been so fierce, that we too are energetic entities, ultimately. This is just a vehicle for our consciousness to experience this reality we call the human world, which is just a band of frequency. And therefore, if we only started to remember what we've been manipulated in a calculated way to forget, that we are consciousness and we are ultimately all consciousness having a brief human experience, that we have the power to overpower these energetic entities. I mean, when you look at it, we're supposed to be 8 billion people in the world now. So that's, say, 8 billion expressions of consciousness potentially. And the number of people in full knowledge that are manipulating the direction of that 8 billion in the way we're describing is absolutely tiny by comparison. The amount of consciousness that collectively we have in these 8 billion people is vastly, vastly greater than the power of the consciousness to impose itself coming from these energetic entities. It's not the tail wagging the dog, whether it's the entities or the cult in the human world. It's not the tail wagging the dog, it's the tail wagging the elephant. And so what we have to be manipulated to believe, and religion did this, is that we're little subordinate entities to some god or other. And I'm not saying there's not a force, which I call the all that is, which some people call God. I'm not saying that. But that we're just subordinate little beings and we have to do what we're told. And that mentality is so unbelievably disempowering that we look to authority to tell us what to think. And so when people come out with COVID out of this unbelievably corrupt organization, the World Health Organization and what have you, people just do what authority tells them without question. And while we do that, we're giving the power to the few to control the many. If what the few say we do en masse, then what is that except the power of the few over the many? But if we said collectively, we're not doing that, we're not doing what you tell us, especially as we get more and more understanding of the scale of why they're telling us that and what the game really is, then we take away the power that this has over us. I mean, it's a classic that you have Elon Musk, who is fronting up, that's all he's doing. He's fronting up SpaceX with the low orbit satellites. He's fronting up Neuralink, connecting the brain to artificial intelligence. He's fronting up Tesla with the promotion of the electric autonomous vehicle. And yet, the alternative media that's supposed to be challenging all that and will tell you that it is, has turned this guy into some kind of god just because he lets people back onto Twitter. And the question then comes is, the deep state controlled Twitter. It controlled what was said on it, what was posted on it. It vehemently censored people in the COVID era, as we know. And so the deep state, is an expression of this cult, had complete control of Twitter, now X. Elon Musk takes it over and then releases these Twitter files that confirm from documentation, yes, the deep state controlled Twitter, yeah. So my question, and I don't see people asking this, is if the deep state controlled Twitter and what was posted on it, in other words, the complete control of censorship, why did they sell it to Elon Musk, who is supposed to be, he's not, a free speech absolutist? The same Elon Musk that is fronting up all these companies that are advancing this agenda we're talking about here. It's a scam. And, you know, people need to get streetwise, and they need to do this, I would suggest. Stop looking for a savior. Stop looking for a political savior or some tech savior. There's 8 billion of us. The collective consciousness of that number is absolutely fantastic in its impact on creation, if only we used it. Stop looking for a savior, look in the mirror and see where the real one is. Collectively, we can still end this, but not if we go on as we are, giving our power away constantly to the few, and then claiming that we are challenging the power of the few. It's ridiculous.
Nosotros teníamos claro que el señor Elon Musk era un traidor más a toda la especie y está dirigido totalmente por parte de ellos. De hecho, él en el año 2016 realiza una entrevista cuando le preguntan acerca de su implante Neuralink y reconoce que puede ir por venas y arterias porque ahí tiene acceso directo a las neuronas.
Yes.
En la quinta columna hemos aprendido a discernir.
Y
José
bien he
Luis,
comprendido
añade algo.
yo, señor Icke, usted está abogando por reivindicando el poder de los seres humanos por encima del poder de la información, del cual, viendo el panorama, sabiendo lo que ya se circula por las redes y que presta muy poca gente atención a la información que se está dando, a pesar de la censura, ¿usted piensa que la forma de abordar este fin de ciclo o este ataque último contra la libertad libre albedrío de los seres humanos es estimular el poder de los seres humanos contra este ataque, independientemente de la información que tengan, puesto que la información o es censurada o es eludida o es, digamos, castigada o ni siquiera existe? Es decir, no podemos contar con la información, sencillamente hay que abogar por estimular el poder de los seres humanos contra un ataque contra toda la población mundial. ¿Y eso cómo se hace sin poder, vamos a decir, sin poder controlar toda la información que le llega a todos los seres humanos, que es el poder que ellos tienen? ¿Cómo llegamos a estimular ese poder en la humanidad si no poseemos los medios de hacerle llegar este conocimiento a los seres humanos?
Well, I think there's another level of communication that is far more powerful than Facebook and Twitter and Google or any of them, and that's the field that connects everything. The five senses can see what we call matter. That's why I'm sitting in this room and I can see form, lights and walls and windows. But between the form is, to me, for my five sense perception, empty space. But it's not. It's energy. It's consciousness, energy, consciousness. And therefore, this field is what we are interacting with. If people could use the analogy of a computer interacting with Wi-Fi. And this field can either dominate us by the information, perception, frequency, etc., vibration within it impacting upon us, or we can impact on it. And the more people that awaken to this understanding, that awaken to what the game is, and I'm talking about this level of the game that we're talking about here, not where the vast majority of this, of what I call the mainstream alternative media is. It's still wondering if Trump's going to win or not. But this big picture, the more people that get this, that awareness is going in the field. It's and people are interacting with this field all the time, and therefore the more people that awaken and that perceptual state goes into the field as a vibrational state, the more other people are going to be impacted by it who are interacting with the field, i.e. everybody. And so that even on that level, we can communicate on a non-verbal level without having to control all the information. See, what the information is doing is impacting upon the field. The key is this field, what I call the simulation field, actually. This field, they have to dominate its state of perception, if you like. So if they can, and what we call censorship is actually just a means of getting to this field to control it. Because we're interacting with it all the time, we are part of it. its state of perception, of frequency, of vibration is impacting upon us. They know that this is the level they're working at. So when they control the media and they control Silicon Valley and the sources of communication, what they're doing is pounding out information, which is also going into this field, and it's affecting human perception, like COVID, or there's a deadly virus, and that then goes from the individual that's conceded to that perception, also putting that into the field. So suddenly the field is awash with frequencies that are vibrating to the level of there is a deadly virus. Oh my God. And that's affecting everyone who's connected to that field, unless you have a consciousness yourself that is powerful enough and aware enough and open enough to resist that. And that's the nature of those in the COVID era, including the people with me tonight, who didn't buy it. The people that did buy it, basically the field was telling them to buy it. And if we're going to reverse that and start to create a situation where this field is empowering us and informing us of a much greater picture rather than the official narrative, then people need to wake up to the level of the game that we're talking about here. And what I'm seeing, and I've been writing about this now for a year, is that the alternative media is being hijacked on purpose, not least through Musk, to hold back this level of the game that we're talking about here. And when people grasp that, then it becomes self-perpetuating communication through the field. You know, when people they talk about the Bush telegraph or being able to communicate non-verbally, and people say about that they had this miraculous situation where they were thinking about someone, and suddenly the phone rang, and it was that someone who they haven't talked to for years, and they go, "Whoa, that's incredible!" But it's not, because when they were thinking of the someone for the first time in ages, perhaps, that someone was thinking of them because they were about to phone them. And through this field comes all this so-called paranormal possibility, where we can communicate with each other in this way through thought transfer and what have you. And this is just an example of how this field is sitting there waiting for us to transform it by our own perception of reality. And this is why I said earlier, we've got 8 billion people, and the collective power of that consciousness, if it was awakened, to its true state and also to the scale of the game, would transform this field. And suddenly you'd have lights going on all over the place without anyone going on Twitter and seeing what someone said, without anyone reading a book. The lights would go on via this field. And we're communicating like this all the time. And this is the way it needs to happen, because this is the way they're controlling us. What they're doing with this cloud, this electromagnetic cloud, is they're laying it over this field so that they control what the field contains. And if if this goes on, what's going to happen? This is the plan. Is that they replace interaction through the field to interaction through the electromagnetic, technologically generated field. So instead of being connected to this one, we're connected to this one, and that will be the hive mind telling us what to think. In other words, we'll become isolated from expanded levels of consciousness and isolated in only the hive mind consciousness.
So do you think that now proportionally they are in danger, and that's why they put so much effort, because there is a leak? We're getting conscious, or can you see a correlation why they are going so strong on trying to kill everybody now and getting them in the in their hands?
Yeah, well, I've been saying for so long that what we're seeing is not so much an attack on humanity as a defensive move. Because, for a long, long time, human consciousness was seriously asleep. When you look back through the ages, there'll come a time, if you go back far enough, I'm sure, when it was a very different world and there was a lot of awakeness. But in the period that we call known human history, the human mind has basically been asleep. It's been put to sleep, not least by religion and now the modern world. But what has been happening, and we've seen it kind of in stages. We saw it when people started to reject, for instance, rule by genetic inheritance called royalty, and they moved into politics. And so you go into politics. So what they try to do is control the political system, but at least there's a wider perspective of, hey, we're not being ruled by just a monarch anymore. We want some say in our lives. So you can see this gathering maturity, if you like, a more and more awareness. And when I started out on the journey I'm still on 34 years ago in 1990. Virtually no one wanted to know about this information. They weren't interested. I couldn't fill a phone booth with interest. But when I look at it now, it's fantastic. The number of people who are looking at the world completely differently, some amazingly differently, by grasping the sort of stuff we're talking about here. And so there is this awakening. And the more people awaken, it's a process and a sequence of more and more expanded awareness. Then these entities and this cult starts to lose control of us, because people are starting to use their own mind again and work it out. So what they're doing is seeking to mitigate, stop that awakening by connecting us to artificial intelligence. So how do you awaken when artificial intelligence through the hive mind is feeding you a perception of self-reality that doesn't ever include the word awakening? You wouldn't even think of awakening. You wouldn't even think of challenging authority, because the hive mind would never be feeding you that perception to do so. And that's why, in this period we are experiencing now, I think you mentioned it earlier, Ricardo, this is the pivotal moment in what we perceive anyway as human history, in the sense that we either stand up and control our own minds now, or it's going to be gone. And so it's a moment where we are deciding where humanity goes from here. is it going to be a free thinking expression of individual uniqueness, or is it going to be a hive mind where everyone thinks the same? And you know, when you look at the woke mentality, for instance, which is a manifestation of this cult that introduced it and funded it into existence, when you look at the religious belief systems, whatever they may be, you're looking at hive minds already. You're looking at groupthink, which is a form of hive mind. And what they're simply doing through AI is planning to bring that into one whole hive mind when humanity as we know it will be over. But it doesn't have to be. But we've got to get streetwise pretty damn fast if we're going to head that off.
Si quisiera preguntar una cosa, ¿qué probabilidades hay de que si los seres humanos fracasamos en este contraataque que tienen por acabar con nuestro libre albedrío, puesto que parece ser que nos despertamos, según dice usted, qué posibilidades hay de que la respuesta de estos dominadores sea la extinción masiva de toda la especie?
Well, anything's possible because, you know, it's been clear to me for a very long time that these entities are completely insane. You know, what I found very compelling is what I'm doing all the time over the decades is looking for patterns, not patterns of disagreement, but patterns of agreement. And what you find, whether you look at religions or whether you look at Asian societies, native societies, is a very compelling theme. And that is of a non-human force manipulating human society. So Christianity has its Satan and its devil and its demons. Islam has its shaitan and Iblis and the jinn. The Gnostic belief system has the Yaldabaoth, their version of Satan, which is the consciousness, I would suggest, and entities they call archons, which is Greek for rulers. And you find the same theme everywhere you go. But interestingly, when you, again, look at the way that these entities and this consciousness, Satan, whatever the name you give it, when you see how it's described, it's invariably described in terms of being stupid and foolish and blind. Because any consciousness that seeks to impose its will on others and make others suffer is an idiot. And so we're not dealing with some all-powerful consciousness with these entities that are manipulating human society. We're dealing with something that's basically moronic. And the only way that it has prevailed thus far is by keeping humanity in a greater ignorance than it's in. Because it's ridiculous, it's stupid. But what it understands, and this is its power center, it understands how to manipulate human perception. So if you look at this, you look at the world we live in, actually there's two worlds, and it's based on what I've just said. One world is the global cult. This is a global network of secret societies. And what it's doing in its compartmentalized structure at the real inner core is passing over knowledge about the plan for humanity, about the fact that actually they're representing these entities. That's why so many rich and famous people in the world who are serving the cult are Satanists, because why do they do satanic ritual? They're interacting with these quote gods. That's who the ancients were interacting with their human sacrifice ceremonies. And still the Satanists today are doing human sacrifice for the very reason you mentioned, Ricardo, which is this release of energy, which they feed off. When the ancients were saying we're doing human sacrifice offerings to the gods, your question is, well, what do the gods get out of it then? But this is what they get, this energy, which is not least generated through the terror of the victim. So you have this secret society network, which is passing on not just knowledge of the plan and knowledge of that, but knowledge of reality and how it works. And if you understand how reality really works and how this whole physicality is illusory, then you have the ability to manipulate people on a level that the general population does not have, because it doesn't understand what reality is. And the same networks, the cult networks, have created the other world, which is what we live in. They have created the so-called education system. The Rockefellers massively did that in America through J.D. Rockefeller and others. They control the media. They control much of the alternative media, actually, increasingly. And what they're doing is, A, passing on advanced knowledge through the cult structure, and B, using their institutions to keep the population in the dark of what they know. And so there is this built-in advantage for the idiot entities and their structure, in which the population they're targeting and trawling energy off are in a much lower level of knowledge than they're in. Not because they have to be, but because it's systematic. And what people like me and people like you are doing is taking that awareness from this cult through research and passing it on to the population so they become alert to what the game is. The challenge in that, and my God, I know that one, is that the programmed perception of the population, because of this structure, is such that when you tell them what they know, they go, "You're mad. That's not possible. That's ridiculous. I can't believe that." But you have to keep going. And I think I've shown that if you do keep going, and you won't kind of walk away from it, then you do start to make inroads. And now, vastly more than at any time in my life, humanity is starting to get more and more of what they know. Unfortunately, like I say, the alternative media hijack, which is real, is to stop it going any further. And it has to get in this arena we're talking about here for people to really start to get it. And more than anything, people need to start to grasp their true power and their true nature, which is consciousness, ultimately an expression of all consciousness.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, señor Icke. Muchas gracias. No quisiéramos retenerle mucho tiempo más. Esperamos poder reunirnos con usted alguna vez. Si en nuestras investigaciones encontramos nuevos hitos y si usted necesita de nosotros para apoyarse en sus trabajos, cuente con nosotros, con Ricardo, conmigo, con la Quinta Columna, y me imagino con nuestra amiga Astrid, que también colabora con nosotros. En todo lo que necesite, nosotros estamos a su disposición y contamos con usted para hacer llegar este mensaje a todo el mundo. Usted ha hablado de una guerra de la que no se menciona nunca y que tiene que ver con esos campos morfogenéticos de su compatriota Rupert Sheldrake, que será de ese campo de acción donde la información también circula ese conocimiento intuitivo del que nadie sabe de dónde se procede y que está flotando en el aire y que es el que probablemente pueda hacer llegar a la población mundial la conciencia de que los humanos estamos en peligro y de que tenemos que defendernos. Si no es por esta vía, difícilmente podemos luchar en esta guerra donde las armas, donde la información circula de forma densa a través de sus antenas de telefonía, ahí la tenemos muy probablemente perdida. Pero en ese campo sutil, muy probablemente tengamos todavía algo que decir. Esperemos que el destino, Dios, quien sea, nos ayude para combatir en esta guerra donde nos jugamos todo. Muchas gracias, señor Icke.
Thank you. The point I would make is, we've been chatting tonight, and I'm getting the Spanish. We've been chatting tonight, and people will watch this, and there'll be voice-to-ear communication as a result of watching it. But the vibration of what we've said tonight has gone into the field, so that it's not just the people who hear this, it's what it does to the field. This information now is in frequency terms circulating. I mean, people talk about frequency. I mean, what is my voice except frequency? It's a frequency. My vocal cords are vibrating a frequency which the brain decodes into what we perceive as human language. But it's a frequency that's passing between us. And this frequency is going into the field. So the more people that talk about this, that circulate this, the more the field is impacted upon. This is the level that they cannot stop. They cannot censor that. The way they're seeking to censor it is by overlaying that field with the electromagnetic cloud. That's what they're seeking to do. That's why they're doing it, to override the interaction with the field. That means we can communicate with each other that way. They want the cloud to overlay that, so that we don't get access to that field in the same way. It's deep stuff, and what I would say is that your work, Ricardo, and everyone at the fifth column, using the English translation, is absolutely fantastic, and it's confirming from a scientific point of view the nature of the challenge we face.
Pues muchísimas gracias, señor Icke. Para nosotros ha sido un placer igualmente el que usted haya tomado parte de su tiempo para poder atendernos. Y seguramente esa sintonía, esa armonía de la que hemos estado hablando, es una calidad de frecuencia que nos ha hecho encontrarnos a todos los que estamos en esa misma sintonía hoy.
100%.
¿Quieres añadir algo?
Yeah, and I would like to thank you too. And I'm very glad that we finished on the term frequency, because in medicine, which is my field, basically, we talk now of frequency medicine, and it's the only thing that will actually be low cost. And I'm going to test a machine not in a week on frequency medicine that is healing, just because it is rebalancing the body cells and the DNA, the junk DNA and the hidden DNA that is the magic DNA that we have. But so we are in this world moving, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. I also want to mention that there are many tricks that they have made that I discovered with French radiesthesist specialists. Is that first they took bells out of all the churches, because bells is frequency when they bing bong, and they have been, I don't know, but you probably reported that in your history books. They took them out. The other thing they did, and I think that's very interesting to measure with Bovis scales, is that all the QR codes and all the code bars is diminishing the energy of anything that is in that box, the food, anything. So the French radiesthesists are doing 8 times alpha on it, and they remeasure, and the energy goes back to 100. But can you imagine that why we have the QR codes and the code bars everywhere is not just for AI? It's also because it takes down our energy. So we maybe need to have a toolbox of people. And I'm trying to tell people, do something with your code bars, take them off, to rip, do a sign on them, and so we need a toolbox so people can advance at their level everywhere they go. But
this is a very interesting point. If people could only see the frequency level beyond visible light of everything in this reality, they would be, well, yes, shocked, but B, they would grasp what's going on. Because we see, for instance, a pill or a vial, and we see it as something chemical or something tangible, quote, physical. But actually, it's a vibrational state. And if you introduce a vibrational disharmony into a vibrational field, you're going to disharmonize that field, and it's going to have expressions in various ways we'd rather not happen. And what you're describing there is exactly that, where just a bar, the bars you see on the what do they call them, the bars with the phones and stuff, is impacting massively on the field that we are living within. And this is the knowledge in this cult, the inner circles of it, that is kept from the people. And that's one of the ways that they manipulate us without people having any idea that that's the case.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It's a great discussion. Love it.
Bueno, gracias a ti, Astrid, por estar presente. A José Luis y al señor Icke, remitirle igualmente, como ha dicho José Luis, que estamos a su plena disposición en caso de que quiera comunicar algo, que cuente con la quinta columna para cualquier cosa. Y igualmente, si nosotros pensamos que tenemos algo que aportar, pues nos pondremos en contacto con usted.
Fantastic. This is the thing. This is the thing. You're coming from one scientific side. I'm coming from kind of the same, but from another angle. And we both meet at the center. That is amazing confirmation. And I absolutely would want to work with you.
Eso es. Muy bien. Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias a todos y damos por finalizada la reunión.
Thank you.
Hasta otra.